Welcome to Partners in Crime. It's great to see everyone. Today's interview is with Michael Wendroff. Did I say that right?
You got it right.
Oh, that's amazing. Michael is a global marketing consultant and the author of the new thrilling novel, What Goes Around, with an MBA from NYU and a fascinating publishing background. His debut novel, as you can see in his background, and I got to copy, it has been a hit in the US, the UK, and overseas. You've even got foreign language rights, haven't you?
Yeah, it's foreign language rights were sold by my agent in Japan, Hungary, and Italy. So I can't wait to see those editions. They're being translated now.
Oh, that's amazing. Welcome to Partners in Crime, Michael.
Thank you.
So let's jump right in. Um, Tell us a little bit about what goes around.
Well, it is a thriller, and the impetus for this story was something that my mother said to me the second that I was born, or so I'm told. I was put on her chest. She looked deeply into my eyes and she said, "Oh, how nice to see you again." And it was that again that, always intrigued me. And I always wanted to write something about that. And then, many years later, when I finally got around to trying to write a book, I wanted, the book to be topical and relevant as well. And, there were a lot of bad things going on at that time. There was a rise in white supremacy. Remember, there was that march in Charlottesville where that poor woman got killed. And then there was the rise of these, strange secret groups, such as incels, which I learned stands for involuntary celibates, who are guys who are just blaming women for their poor lives instead of themselves, and groups called Boogaloo Boys. So I wanted to understand, what was going on, what was up with them, and what influenced them. So I did a lot of research, and it ended up, really in some ways being, exploring the nature of evil in today's society. So the book basically started the second I was born, and includes events, up to today. And unfortunately, they are still topical and relevant events, as these groups have not gone away, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so, okay, to give listeners a little bit of context,
Mhm.
the time period, month, day that this begins.
So it's contemporary. It's in today's
Yeah.
time frame, in
Okay.
in a small town where these mysterious killings that are happening, and
Mhm.
there's two detectives that are tasked with trying to find out, what is going on, and then eventually it gets into these other topics.
Yeah, it just completely amazes me. And every time I read the first line in your cover copy, and evil has many faces, I mean, that just triggers something. And I think for many people, but you really talk about the aspects of evil and the different aspects of evil throughout the novel.
Um, Yeah, I do. I try and weave in a bunch of things, and my first chapter is one line, which is, "I'll remember the day I die for the rest of my life." And so, I try to make it a thriller, touching on things people may not know that much about, as well as have this kind of crazy twist at the end, which is very unexpected and. Um, one reviewer said, quite the original twist, which is the way I like to hear it, but for sure.
Yeah, we're already getting emails about how great it is. So that twist is really causing some stir.
Good, good.
So you have two detectives portrayed throughout the novel. And the dynamic between them, their names are Jack and Jill,
Yes.
correct? Um, and that's a key aspect of the novel, their relationship. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you approached creating them and their dynamic?
Yeah. Well, it's a thriller, so thrillers really have to be plot driven. Thriller readers want things to be moving, along. But, at the same time, I believe the key for successful thrillers is not only have a exciting plot, but also, have characters that are key, characters that the readers can really relate to.
Mhm.
So, and also, of course, conflict is key in almost any type of novel. So in this situation with these characters, we have, Jack, who is well, they're partners and they're trying to solve those mysterious killings. And Jack is really, he's a big guy, likes to use his fists. Jack is really a homage to Jack Reacher from Lee Child's books, which I really enjoy reading. And then you have, Jill, who's, brains and beauty. And, they're paired up together to solve this, but they hate each other. And they hate each other based on, things that happened when they were both together at the police academy. And so for me, the interesting thing with the characters and the conflict of them hating each other is okay. So what's going to happen? Are they have to find a killer basically before they kill each other, and what are they going to do? Is being united in a common mission going to bring them together? Are they going to become more understanding of each other? Are they perhaps going to learn something from each other? Might they get romantically involved? Or what sometimes happens is the typical, or not typical, but the phrase of, familiarity breeds contempt. Could that happen here too? So I wanted to have, interesting characters that, their relationship could go either way.
It's amazing to me because yes, it can go either way. But so when you're in that position, especially as detectives on a case, respect is key because that person's got to have your back. And so that makes this a life or death situation every moment of the book because, if you don't trust your partner, how can you be sure that you're going to make it out of the next situation alive?
You're right. If they hate each other, they may not be, so careful to watch each other's back, for sure. But I think though, police in general are gonna, watch out for each other. But
Yeah.
you never know in these situations.
Yes, I agree. Now, you call this a psychological thriller, not just a thriller. So, what aspects of that particular genre do you think pull readers in? And how does what goes around hit those?
Well, I think the psychological thriller genre is very interesting. I think people really like it because first, these books have to really be enthralling. They have to be page turners. They have to be thrilling. And it's almost like people who go to horror movies in the movie theater and they want to be scared. That's what they're looking for. So I think, thriller readers are um, looking for that kind of visceral reaction. But the other thing about psychological thrillers is there's a second component where the readers are really trying to figure out, who done it, what's going on, how's this going to end. So, with this genre of books, you have both, the visceral reaction you want to get from your readers, and you also have, more of an intellectual response, figure out what's going on. I mean, I guess it's really the head and the heart that the author has to be addressing. And that's what I was looking for. And I was very happy with. I think my favorite review that I had came from the J.D. Barker, who's a best-selling author, and he said, Wendroff expertly weaves a narrative that begs just one more page, and that's what I wanted, that page-turning aspect in my book.
Yeah, you really make people think, but you stop their hearts as they're turning the pages. So yeah, it's
That's my new favorite line.
I'm glad I could help. So You started writing during COVID. And can you tell us how that impacted what you wrote and how you wrote?
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to write a thriller or
Hmm.
a book, but mostly a thriller. And life kind of got in the way. I was in marketing and doing that, and raising a family, and finally the pandemic hit, and it was that period of time in the pandemic where you basically couldn't do anything. You certainly couldn't go to the movies, could barely go to restaurants. I live in Florida. I couldn't even play tennis or go to the beach. So I had no more excuses. So I sat down and I wrote it. And in terms of, my writing style, I mean, for me, it's really, three things involved when I'm writing. It's first, doing the plotting, then it's doing the research, and then it's doing the actual writing. And for the plotting, and there's actually two types of writers out there. There are some writers who are called pantsers, like pants, and they literally sit down in front of their computer and start writing by the seat of the pants, and they don't know where the story's going, just happens. And I really respect that, but that's not me. Can't do that. I mean, I need to, plot out my book in a lot of detail. Maybe not quite as much detail as a James Patterson might, but I need to know, how it's going to end. I need to know, what the subplots are. I need to know, where to put the twists, and I need to know where to put the red herrings. I need to have that all figured out before I could do anything. And it's not like the plot isn't going to evolve, like it's not going to change. Sometimes actually there's a point where I get like too involved and too interested in one of my characters, and if the plot said you better, I have to kill this one off. I may say, I like this character a lot. I don't think I could kill him off, so then I got to change the plot. Or there's this other time when I did go ahead and kill off a character that I really got to like a lot, and so like the next week I was in depression, and my wife says to me, "What the hell's wrong with you? These characters aren't real." I said, "Well, to me, they're real. They're real."
Very real.
So that's the plotting part, and then the research part of it is now that I'm writing my second novel, there's Chat GPT, which I know you have to be careful, but it's a much more efficient way to do research than when I was researching my first book, and I had to go through Google and 30 sources from there. But actually, the best way I found to do research is to talk to the people who were involved in the professions and incidents that are going on in your book. So, I spoke to FBI agents. I spoke to, our local, a female detective from our local police department. I spoke to chiefs of police and other cops. Um, Now, I don't think I spoke to a serial killer, but you never know. You never
At least
know.
nobody admitted it.
That's right. And the numbers of serial killers supposedly, walking around today is pretty scary. But so that's the research. And then lastly, in terms of the writing, my process is, I write better in the morning when I'm fresh. So I'll get up early and start writing. And just, get the story out on the PC. Just, get the plot elements moving and don't worry about the writing itself. And then the next day, I'll go back and I'll review what I wrote. And that's when, I try and make it real writing. I'll try and make sure that, each word is right in the sentence and fits with the other words in the sentence correctly. And each sentence in the paragraph fits well with the other sentences in the paragraph. And, that's where I'll add the metaphors and the analogies, and maybe try and here and there make it a little poetic. So I'll do the refining, and then after I'm done with that, then I will write the very roughly the next part of the storyline, keep that going, which I'll then review the next day. So that's my process. Get it out roughly, review it, then write again roughly. And I'll do that, every single day until finally I could put down my two favorite words, which are the end. So that's basically my process.
That's a long process and very intense. About how many hours does it take you in a day to do that?
Well, I would normally be writing from, let's call it like 8 in the morning till 1. And, at some point, and everyone's different, but at some point, the creativity is kind of exhausted. And I know it's not like working this hard physical job, but, it is tiring too when you're trying to use your brain as much as you could.
Do you find, and I know this is completely off topic, but do you find like doing activities like you mentioned tennis and going to the beach bring back that creativity? Just taking a walk even help you in any respect?
Um, well, I would say, all those things tend to relieve the physical condition you found yourself in. But I've also found that you know at night when you're sleeping, sometimes things that were cooking in your brain become a lot clearer the next morning from just your sleep overnight. So that's happened a lot too.
Yeah, because you've thought through what you were drafting yesterday and refined a lot of that.
Well, and your brain's doing that while you're asleep. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, some great dreams, I bet. That's amazing. I
Must be scary.
can imagine. So, before you started your writing career, you were in marketing.
Yes.
So what was the transition like from going, I mean, that was huge, a big transition in some respects, but in other respects, I think probably not, right?
It was a big transition. I'd worked as a marketing director for some large corporations, and then I had my own marketing strategy consulting firm. But in both those cases, I mean, you are responding to the needs of others. You've got bosses, you've got clients, and so your work is about doing the best for them. And then when you're an author, all of a sudden it's very different. I mean, you're responsible basically to yourself. You report to yourself. So I guess it becomes easier to slack off. And if you want to write a novel, it's a big undertaking. And I think the way I overcame that difference is really establishing a schedule and really trying to have self-discipline. Um, and and so for me, it was you got to really write every day. You got to treat it like it's a job, like you go in the morning to your job and get it done. Um, and even more than a 5 day week job. I think it's really a 7 day week job. I think you got to write every day, and I think you have to. You can take Christmas off, and maybe take New Year's off, day here, a day there. But beyond that, I mean, I remember once when I was writing this novel, I took a 2 week vacation, and it was a disaster because you're out of the flow of everything. By the time you come back, you're backtracking. It takes a long time to really catch up. So that's something I learned, and that was a challenge and different. But that's my advice to anyone trying to write is to just try and do it every day.
That's really good advice. I agree. No matter what I do, it seems easier if you just do it even a little bit every day. Just don't completely wipe it from your brain until it's time to wipe it from your brain.
Exactly. Exactly.
And now, how long from the beginning to the end of your process did it take you to write what goes around?
Took me probably a couple of years to write it. And then there's the whole editorial process, which was not quite what I expected it to be. I had great editors. My editors are terrific, but I learned that there's a lot of different kinds of editors in editing, and the editor that bought the book,
Uh-huh.
I would classify him as more of a strategic editor, like dealing with big chunks of the book. Should this happen earlier or later? Or should there be more of
Yeah.
this or less of that? And then there's the line editor that, is looking at every line of your book and making sure it's okay. And then, there's the copy editor who's looking to make sure you didn't say she has green eyes in chapter 2 and blue eyes in chapter 10. And then there's the proofreader. And it was something because at every stage of those different editorial aspects, I had to read the book again. And I thought I was done. And then my publisher says to me, "Oh, we've just set the type on the hardcover edition. You need to review the whole book to make sure nothing dropped out of the type." And it's like, I can't tell you how many times I read my book. It's a good thing I liked it. But the weird thing is, every time I came to those twists, I was still surprised.
Oh, that's amazing. Did you find yourself getting like the blur, like because you knew like what was going to happen, like it just kind of blurs and sometimes you miss stuff that you shouldn't have missed?
I don't think I got the blur, but the problem I think probably with most authors is that, every time you look at what you've written, you can improve it
Yes.
more.
Mhm.
So, there's that. You got to be willing to step back and not do that, or you'd really drive your editors crazy and your timeline would be shot. But yeah, that for me is a thing. You can always say, well, maybe this word's better than that word, that kind of thing.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Um, so how did you approach promoting and launching your books in the other countries?
Um, well, the Japanese, the Italian, the Hungarian, the editions, they're not out yet. They're being translated. My book was launched in UK, USA, and Australia in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. And I think my background was helpful in the marketing part of it because first of all, obviously marketing 101 is make sure you're fulfilling a consumer need and targeting correctly. So, so I obviously read a lot of mysteries and thrillers and especially any of the best-selling ones. So I know kind of what that market's looking for. And you have to know exactly who your target is. And it's interesting, I think, that in novels in general, the audience is a lot more female than male. When it
Mhm.
comes to thrillers, and I know from my book, it's really pretty even, which I like.
Yeah.
And so you learn those things in the marketing career, um, and you also I used to have to evaluate advertising all the time, and in the businesses I was marketing, usually consumer products, there'd be TV advertising, and a TV ad could be 30 seconds or 15 seconds. And because time is so limited to tell your story, you got to make every word count in those ads. And, even though my novel is 90,000 words, I still kind of feel I needed to make every one of those words count. And in terms of the marketing, publishing is very different. There's no TV advertising, there's barely any print advertising. And, these days, the publishers, don't do much. I mean, publishers are great with the editing and cover design and all that stuff, but they're not giving authors a lot of marketing support. So, it's really incumbent upon the author to do all these things. And, social media is key. So you got to post a lot. You got to, reach out to bloggers and podcasters and, newspapers. Like just last week, after pestering my local newspaper editor enough, he ran a really nice profile of me and what goes around in the local paper. And
That's
then
great.
we post that all over. And, going to book fairs and bookstore signings and all that. In fact, I think I was in certain situations, I think I'm an advantage because of my background in marketing and selling. For instance, I went to a bookstore here and they were doing signing of local authors. So I was a with a bunch of other local authors. And, a lot of a lot of writers tend to be introverted. So I'm there looking at all these other authors, and they're sitting behind their table with their book there, and they're kind of waiting for people to come by and say something to them. And I'm standing up there, and I'm grabbing them, and I'm giving them my spiel. And I sold that. I mean, this has happened at book fairs and a few things, and I've always sold out pretty quickly. So I think it's because of my background. I have a little advantage there. But the truth is, marketing is different in publishing. And, if you're a writer, I think these days, writing is 50% of the job and pushing your book is the other 50%.
It's a lot of work, and not all authors love to do it.
Right.
They just don't love it. So that makes it a little more difficult because there are great writers that don't enjoy marketing. Um, so it's hard for them. Yeah. Now let's bring it back to your mom and the words she said to you when you were born. And how did your life growing up affect your writing and your book?
Well, it did because, I'm kind of from a book background.
Mhm.
So my mother was actually an editor at some major New York City publishing houses way back in the day. And in fact, I distinctly remember her on weekends sitting cross-legged on the bed and manuscript pages strewn about her. And she had a red pen in hand. And I remember her marking up all of these pages with her editorial comments in her red pen. Now, when I got my editorial feedback, it wasn't in a red pen, but those those editorial comments in the margins of the Word document were just as how should I say, instructive. But at least I was prepared for feedback, seeing what my mother had done all that time. And then she had remarried a literary agent, and he was a agent that specialized in, or he had a lot of clients who were mystery writers and thriller writers. He had a lot of good clients. David Morrell, who's the original Rambo author, and
Oh, cool.
he had Joseph Fidner, who's still writing really well these days, and Eric Van Lusbader, and lots of really good clients. And of course, I got to read all of these books for free. So that got me into the genre. Um, but I remember the thing I remember most was I met a lot of these authors, and one author was Robert Ludlum, who some people know from the Born Identity movies with Matt Damon. And I remember one time when I was young, I actually vacationed with my family at his winter home, which was in St. Thomas in the Caribbean. And I remember waking up one morning early and tiptoed into the living room and saw him, sitting there on his couch, a yellow legal pad in one hand, and in the other hand, a number two pencil. And he was just writing away. And that's how he wrote his 450-page novels, by hand. Now, I admired Ludlum's, prose and his plotting, but I could not write a novel by hand. So thankfully, when it was time for mine, I had a PC. Um, and then I guess there was one other thing, I guess, in terms of influences when I was growing up. So I eventually went to NYU. And when I was getting my MBA in marketing, I got to, combine my two loves, which was, the thriller books and a newfound love of marketing. And I actually wrote my MBA thesis on combining them. It was on marketing in the publishing industry.
Oh, wow.
And the trade journal, Publishers Weekly, actually got wind of this, and they helped set me up with interviews with executives in the publishing companies, and they actually excerpted my thesis in 3 editions of Publishing Weekly, and they paid me for basically writing my thesis. And that was the first time I got paid for writing, and I liked it.
I can imagine. That's really cool. It's a great
It
story.
was. I mean, the other thing that was cool about that was I remember once. Um, I was waiting in the office of the editor-in-chief of Simon and Schuster. At the time, his name was Michael Korda. And, it's past the time we were supposed to have the interview. And I'm waiting. Then finally, the door opens up and he waves to me and says, come on in. And who does he introduce me to? But Truman Capote. And he talked about thrillers in cold blood. So that was
Wow,
pretty wild. So lots of influences growing up wanting me to, have some part in the publishing process.
that's amazing. And so you continue to stay on track with that, and like you go to classes and meet people. You mentioned going and meeting people in the police department. But you also continue that education. And what are some ways that you continue that education?
Yeah, so what you mentioned about the police department is our local police department runs something called Citizens Police Academy,
Yeah.
which they basically, it's a course over 10 weeks, and they take you through every aspect of policing and detective work and forensics and legal stuff. So, obviously I wanted to get into that for my thriller writing, and figure the more you know, the better it is. So that's been a great course. I mean, you're actually out there, you know, like this morning we were driving cars through obstacle courses at high speeds, and we've, gone to gun ranges and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely been a learning experience. But I've also, over the years, gone to writing seminars. Thriller Fest in New York City uh, annually has a big conference, and a lot of the days of it are, working on your craft, and you're talking to instructors or best-selling authors, and then obviously you have cocktail parties and all of that where you get to meet other people. And I found the author community is just amazing, very generous with their time, very, very nice people. And then, there's local groups. I belong to the Florida Writers Association, and they have their meetings. So, there's a lot of way to, continue to learn, which I believe you can always continue to learn. And they're fun too, because they're nice social events with your comrades.
Do you have a critique group? I know a lot of authors have critique groups.
We actually do. Well, yes and no. I don't have like a formal critique group that I go to every week, but when I wrote my novel, you know, my family were the first readers, and I got feedback from them, which is excellent feedback. And then I found what's called beta readers.
Mhm.
So these are people that enjoy your genre, read a lot in your genre. And they could be friends. The people I dealt with, there were four people that I knew, and so I gave them my novel to read in an early form. And I know, they're not going to be that hard on you, but they gave me a lot of good insights,
Okay.
which I corrected before I was able to then, go to a real editor.
Wow, that's great. I knew not everybody has that availability, and it's great that you do in your area.
Yeah, yeah, I'm lucky.
So before we get off here, I've noticed that you always wear button-down shirts, and I heard there's a story behind that. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. Actually, my great grandfather, Peter Christensen, was brought over from the University of Copenhagen, Denmark,
Mhm.
to way back when, he was brought over by Thomas Edison to work with him in his labs in New Jersey. So my great grandfather did a lot of work with him, and he was able to get a lot of patents. And one thing that he discovered was plastic buttons, because before there used to be wooden buttons and zippers. Um, so because of that, he became very wealthy. He had a mansion. He was known around town as the Button King. Unfortunately, his son gambled away all that money, so that was gone. But I'm still, proud to wear button-down shirts whenever I can.
That's amazing. And you said you're working on another book. Is there a timeline for that?
You sound like my publisher.
I did my
uh,
best.
Um, yeah, I mean, I've already done the plotting, which for me is the hardest part.
Oh, good.
The writing for me is relatively easy, but the plotting and the research, they are done, and I've just started to do the writing. So, but it will involve, the two main characters from what goes around. Because publishers really like when you have more of a series, so that people who
Mhm.
like the first one are already invested in those characters and are more likely to buy your second one. So this is probably going to be more of a prequel than a sequel, but it does involve those two characters. So I'm looking forward to getting to know them again.
I'm excited. That sounds great. Um, so thank you so much for being on our show today. It's great to meet you and to get to spend time with you today.
Okay,
Um,
this is a lot of fun.
thanks. Partners in Crime, if you want his book, What Goes Around, be sure to check the show notes. All the links are in there. And from what I hear, this is like amazing and you must read it. So get on that right away.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. And we will talk to you soon.
Great. Take care.